It's great to be with you again this week for another episode of Webinar Wednesday. Really interesting topic for us today on killing manufacturing. And I don't mean that term lightly. In the screenshot, Melissa was like, wow, that's a little bit of a morbid screenshot. And I said, yes, but it's actually a morbid concern and a morbid topic in terms of what could happen to the world of manufacturing if we don't figure out the talent crisis. Now, I came across this article not too long ago. I found it interesting. It speaks to one of the root causes of the current labor crisis. It says gauging the labor force effects of retiring baby boomers. And it talks about as aging baby boomers start retiring, the effects on the overall economy and on certain occupations and industries will be substantial, creating a need for younger workers to fill the vacated jobs left behind by those who are retiring, many of which sound familiar, will require relatively high levels of skill. Now, what wasn't so interesting to me was this article itself. We've all heard what you're seeing on your screen. We all know that the baby boomers have been retiring. We all know that there aren't enough people to fill the positions that are being left behind. What I found interesting about this article rather, was the month and the year in which it was written. You see, this article was published in the Monthly Labor Review in July of the year 2000. The current labor crisis isn't anything new. We have known about this for more than 2 decades. I can remember sitting in groups of CEOs in my CEO networking group back in my manufacturing days, and we would have resource specialists that came in literally 20 years ago and said, it's the football through the garden hose. We are having all of these baby boomers that are working their way through life that will be retiring, and what they leave behind will be a crisis if we don't do anything about it. Well, guess what? We didn't do enough about it. And here we are in the current crisis. These are just some headlines that I pulled from the last week and a half. Millions of jobs and a shortage of applicants, says CNN Business. Welcome to the new economy. How about this one from ABC 12 in the state of Michigan? Statewide labor shortage extends to General Motors in their manufacturing complex in Flint, Michigan. According to Reuters, U.S. manufacturing is gaining steam, but raw material and labor shortages are mounting. The Minnesota Post tells us that we have a whole group of mysterious lost workers. What is driving the shortage? The great American labor shortage, says the Wall Street Journal. And CIBC talks about a worker shortage that is creating a national economic crisis. And indeed, the labor shortage, as we will talk about today, is in fact an economic crisis and a crisis for our nation's manufacturers. Now, we've worked through crises before. We'll talk about that a little bit later on today. But I want to tell you that for so many manufacturing crises that I have faced over the course of 20 some years as a manufacturing CEO, you know who I turned to so many times? It was my friend, Eli Goldratt. Now, he wasn't really my friend, but he feels like a friend, somebody that I felt like I knew because he wrote some amazing books about manufacturing. Many of you are familiar with the goal. I have often said, if you show me a young person who understands the goal, understands the theory of constraints, understands a bottleneck in manufacturing and knows what to do about it, I will show you somebody who is worth their weight in gold in the world of manufacturing. Well, many of you have read The Goal. If you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. You know about the book's protagonist, a man named Alex Rogo, who's responsible for a plant. He can't figure out how to make the plant more productive. He meets a mentor named Jonah who shows him how to do it, and he recites his lessons over the course of a novel or a story, if you will, in the book, The Goal. Great lessons in that book. What many people, even most of the people who have read The Goal, don't realize is there was actually a sequel to that book, a book written several years later, again by Goldratt, called It's Not Luck. In that book, the protagonist from The Goal, Alex Rogo, is now responsible for not one manufacturing plant, but 3. And he has to figure out how to take 3 manufacturing plants for which he's responsible and make them more efficient, make them more productive, and make them more profitable. I won't spoil the ending for you. It's a great book, but I am going to tell you this. He uses a tool in this book that I have used time and time again in my years facilitating continuous improvement processes, opportunities, Kaizen events with manufacturers. And the idea is that we take a whole group of Post-it notes and we write down all of the problems in our organization and we put them down on the table and we start showing which problems are caused by which other problems. And the whole theory is The whole theory is that if we link all of our problems in manufacturing, all of our problems in a business, and start showing which ones are caused by other problems, and we allow the problems that are at the root cause to find their way to the center of the table, and the ones that are results of those to find their way to the outside of the table, what we're left with in the middle of the table is those 2 or 3 things that if we fix, will fix most of the problems in our organization. A really simplified version of this looks like what I have on your screen. So let's say we have a bunch of Post-it notes and we start asking our team, what are the problems that we have in our organization? Maybe somebody says, well, we're rejecting too many parts on the line for poor quality. Somebody else says we have a shortage of material handling equipment. Someone else is talking about how we have hydraulic oil on our production parts, and that's creating quality rejects. Warehouse employee morale is suffering. We have a bottleneck in the warehouse. Our machines are going down too often. We can't produce enough parts. We have inoperable forklifts. Somebody else says, you know what? We keep having hydraulic failures on our production line. Somebody else says we have all these late orders, and someone else puts down poor preventive maintenance. Now, again, this is a short list of the types of problems we might see. When we're done, we may have 200 or 300 Post-it notes around the table. But let me show you how this works. We start taking a look at what problems cause other problems. So our late orders arriving at our customers' facilities late, they're not on-time orders, is due to machine downtime. And then we look and we say, you know what? Our quality rejects, those are due to hydraulic oil falling on the part and creating those rejects. Somebody says, you know what? We have warehouse employee morale that is not good. We're having challenges keeping our warehouse employees excited about the work that they do. And we have bottlenecks in our manufacturing environment from the standpoint of processing product through our warehouse. Well, guess what? The warehouse employee morale and the warehouse bottlenecks are being created by a shortage of material handling equipment in the world of our warehouse. Our hydraulic failures are causing the machine downtime and the hydraulic oil on the parts, and our inoperable forklifts are the reason that we have equipment shortages. So now we trace that back to a root cause, poor preventive maintenance. So these were the tabs, these were the Post-it notes that we had on the screen, on the last screen, put in order of what is causing problems in the manufacturing operation. And again, the idea is we can trace these all back to 1 or 2 or 3 root causes that we then can fix. And in the process of doing that, fix all of the other problems in our manufacturing operation. Well, let's assume that we did this with a manufacturing operation that we're working with today, and the types of ideas that came up with on the Post-it notes where we couldn't promote people from within our own organization. So we didn't have a pathway for people to have more opportunities in our organization. We were passing bad parts on the production line. So we had parts that were non-conforming that were making it to customers. We couldn't recruit new technicians. We'd go out to the market and try and find them, but we couldn't find them. Our employees were working long hours. We have poor throughput on our production lines. We have a reputation as a business for working our people too hard. We have low employee morale in some cases. We're having a hard time recruiting people from the outside of our organization. We're missing our efficiency goals. And you get the idea. Ineffective training, wasting materials, too high of overtime costs, our material costs being too high, our equipment being down, employees not understanding throughput. We can't absorb new work. We can't cross-train our people. Our orders are all late to customers. Poor machine setup. Compensation is too low for the people working in our manufacturing environment. We don't have enough people to run our production lines, so on and so forth. Shortage of an entry level of talent in the manufacturing facility, and employees missing necessary skills. Now, I can tell you from experience that when I've done these types of processes, when I've gone through this exercise with manufacturers and other businesses, it is amazing how many of the problems in our organization come back to, like we said, 1 or 2 or 3 root causes, and one of those root causes is almost always the same. Let's look at this information a little bit differently. Let's put the tabs that you see on your screen in the order of what items are causing the other items. We can't absorb new work in our manufacturing operation because we don't have enough people to run our production line. And I can tell you, this is a real problem. I talk to manufacturers right now who have to turn away work, turn away production growth, because they literally do not have enough people in their manufacturing plant to be able to run new orders. And that causes a shortage of entry-level talent, or is rather caused by a shortage of entry-level talent. So we have a shortage of entry-level talent that prevent us from having enough people to run the line. Why is that? Well, because we can't promote our people from within because they don't have the right skills. If we could promote the people that we have in, for instance, a machine operator position into an electromechanical maintenance position, and then backfill the machine operator. with maybe a production person and backfill the production person with a new hire, which is easier to find, by the way, than somebody who is highly skilled. But we can't promote our people from within because we haven't given our people the right skills. Why? Because our people aren't cross-trained. Now, people not being cross-trained can be caused by causing poor preventive maintenance, which in turn can cause our equipment downtime. So again, root causes toward the middle, some of the other issues toward the outside. We can't recruit new technicians. Why? Because we have a reputation as a company for working our people too hard because our people are working too many hours. Now, that is also causing our overtime costs to be too high and also creating an employee morale program problem because we're inviting people to come work on the weekends, work long hours, work overtime, and so on. Our long hours for our employees in part are being created because we can't promote and backfill people from the shop floor. Our material costs are too high because we're wasting materials. Maybe that's because of our poor machine setup. Our passing of bad parts on the production line is because our people are missing the necessary skills for them to be successful in inspecting parts. Orders are late to customers because we're missing our efficiency goals, because we have poor throughput on the line, because our employees haven't been trained to identify how to improve throughput. Well, why haven't they been trained? It's because we don't have an effective training program in our organization. Why have we not cross-trained our people? Because we don't have an effective training program in our organization. Why have we not trained our people to inspect? Because we don't have an effective training program in our operation. Why do we have poor machine setup? Because we don't have an effective training program. All of the things that people are trying to do to fix the talent shortage. We're trying to automate, but it's difficult to automate because our people may not understand automation. We want to implement smart technology, but our people maybe don't understand smart technology. And I can tell you from experience, more often than not, when we get to those three items in the center of the table that are causing all of our other problems, training is right at the top of the list. And our inadequate training programs in manufacturing are causing, in part, an all-out crisis in talent. Now, let's face it, folks, this isn't the first crisis that manufacturing has faced. If we think back to the 1970s, before I was in manufacturing, but we had a global automotive market that was in absolute turmoil because Japanese auto manufacturers figured out how to make automobiles with fewer defects, figured out how to make automobiles with less cost, and that totally disrupted the world of automotive manufacturing here in the United States and across the globe. Remember the misery index? Some of us do in the 1970s, where we had interest rates and we had unemployment and we had inflation. All three of those numbers were double digits, creating a crisis for the entire manufacturing, including entire economy, including manufacturing. Losing work to Mexico, I lived through this one. So manufacturers in the US were relocating work to outside of the United States, creating huge disruptions in supply chain, huge issues with filling positions in manufacturing because we had more people than we had to fill those positions. I remember the telecom crash in the early 2000s where companies like Lucent and Alcatel and EMC and others saw huge disruptions because of the demand for telecom equipment falling through the floor in the wake of new technology. That affected manufacturing across the country, as did the natural gas crisis in 2001. Do you remember when natural gas spiked from about $2 a decatherm up to $10 a decatherm, going up by 5 times? And if you were somebody that relied on that kind of energy for your manufacturing process, huge impact on your manufacturing operation. The Chinese manufacturing plant threatened the zero when we were worried about things, and still are perhaps, like currency manipulation, but we had huge exodus of manufacturing to China during that period of time. The economic crisis after 9/11, the credit crisis and the Great Recession that took place 2007 to 2009. I lived through all of these. I saw how they disrupted manufacturing. We were disrupted again by COVID, changing our operations, worried about whether demand will still be there. Well, I can tell you in the same sense that these were crises. They were crises we figured our way through, but they were crises nonetheless. The training crisis right now is killing manufacturing. And I can tell you it's killing manufacturing because I talk to manufacturers that have had jobs open for 120 days that they can't fill. Manufacturers that are in some cases paying double to bring talent back because that talent left for another position that paid even more. All of these crises are related to the fact that we are not training our people in an adequate fashion. And if we are to fix the talent crisis, training has to be a huge part of the fix. How do we fix it? Number one, like anything else, we have to admit we have a problem. We have to admit that as manufacturers, we need to do a better job of training. We need to do a better job of preparing our people for careers in advanced manufacturing, for taking people in entry-level manufacturing positions and upskilling them quickly into positions in our organizations where we can add more value, where they can add more value. We have to agree, we have to understand that we have a problem in manufacturing, and that problem is that most of us are not very effective in the way that we train our workforce. Number two, own the solution. Education can be a big part of the solution. We're going to talk about that, but I'm here to tell you today that technical colleges, community colleges, universities, as hard as they are working to fix this problem, cannot fix it on their own. The problem is way too big. We have way too many open positions for a technical college, a community college, a university, a high school to fill them all. They're a huge part of the solution, but they are not going to fix the problem. Federal government, state government, they're going to be part of the solution. They are not on their own going to fix the problem. The problem must be fixed by manufacturers. It must be fixed by you. It must be fixed by the manufacturers you work with. Number three, we have to make an absolute commitment to upskilling our people. Be maniacal about it. Make it as important as delivering on time. Make it as important as delivering quality product. Make it as important as collecting your accounts receivable. It has to be as important as all those other things we do in business that drive a successful business. We have to commit to upskilling. And the final thing that we're going to ask you to do is to tune in. To tune in to this webinar series for the next several months, where just about every other week we are going to cover a topic related to effective workforce training programs. We're going to talk about what we are calling the 10 steps to perfect industrial training. Now, I want to cover those steps today from 30,000 feet, give you a sense for what it is that we're talking about, what it is that we're thinking, and then invite you to tune back into that series of webinars so that you can learn even more about what we're teeing up, so that you can be part of fixing this very serious economic crisis in manufacturing. Number one, we've already talked about this. Let's admit the problem. Let's admit we're not good at training. Let's admit that we are not going to create a future workforce unless we recognize the value of training, unless we implement really effective training programs. That's what today is about. This webinar today is about admitting we have a problem, recognizing that we have a problem in manufacturing that we all need to collectively fix. Number two, and what we'll be talking about in the next related webinar, is training to the gap in avoiding resources, wasting resources, and overtraining. When we think about somebody in a training program, that individual has unique needs. We want to meet them exactly where their knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. If we start them too far into a training program and it's over their head, what are we going to do? We're going to discourage them. And by the way, they won't blame themselves. They will blame the training program. And it's a really good way to not get a good training program off the ground. If we start somebody in something that's too remedial, too parochial for them, we are not respecting their intelligence. We're wasting their time. And they are going to get the idea that the training program is not a good use of their time. We can perfectly pinpoint where the knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. And in that webinar, we're going to show you exactly how we do it. Number three, personalized pathways. Every single employee in your team, every single member of your company's team has different strengths in areas where they need work. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because they haven't had that experience. So somebody's really, really good with basic AC/DC and electric relay control and programmable logic controllers. Let's not waste their time and the company's resources putting them in a program learning things that they've already learned. Let's put them on a pathway. Maybe they don't know smart sensors or smart devices. Maybe they don't know data analytics. We can create a personal pathway within our organizations for every single learner, or at a minimum, every single position within our company, and make that specific to that learner or to that group of learners. On the third webinar, we're going to show you exactly how to do that. Number four, industry education partnerships. I have the opportunity to work with technical colleges, community colleges, universities, school districts all over the Midwest and all over the United States. And I will tell you, it is amazing what some of these institutions are doing to create the next generation of workforce talent. We're going to give you examples, and we are going to talk about how you can partner with your local community or technical college on two things. Number one is create degree pathways for the people within your organization, if that's where they should be going. Technical college tech diploma, if they should be on a pathway to an associate's degree, if they should be on a pathway to a bachelor's degree. We're going to talk about how we do that. We're also going to talk about how we make learning as flexible as possible. Gone are the days where we can put a whole group of 50 people in a conference room for a day in a learning program. Why? Because production doesn't stop. We're already way too busy in our manufacturing facilities to pull our people off the floor and put them in a training program. But we can take them one by one, 2 or 3 hours a week, and provide learning to them individually. We're going to talk all about how we do that, how we leverage the great things that are happening in our community and technical colleges, and leverage some of the more customizable learning platforms that will be available to your team members. Number 5, choose the right e-learning platform. My Harry Potter fans, my fellow Harry Potter fans will recognize platform 9 3/4. That's a little bit of a shout out to all of you. But the truth of the matter is we have to choose the right platform for delivering our learning. And there are tons and tons of options for e-learning and interactive, multimedia-based, hands-on, computer-level graphics type e-learning that is available to your learners today. And we're going to talk about some examples of that. We're also going to talk about how we execute step by step. So once we roll out our e-learning program, whether that's in association with our community or technical college, or if that's not an option for you, whether it's doing it individually, we're going to talk about step by step how we roll out an effective program for employee learning. It's like any other new system that we put into manufacturing. We have to map out what it is that we're going to do. We have to map out our benchmarks. We have to map out our plan so that we can follow that plan to the letter to create the results that we're looking for. In our 6th webinar, we are going to talk about how we execute step by step to create that pathway. Number 7, the secret to skills that stick. And here's my admission. You've heard me say this on the webinar series, Webinar Wednesday, many times. And that is that I am a hands-on kinesthetic learner. I'm not a classroom learner. I'm not a person that can sit in a meeting, in a conference room, in a classroom, in a lecture, and listen to somebody and take notes and expect me to walk out of that room with those competencies. I know people who can. I'm amazed by people who can do that. There are lots of people that learn very successful in that environment. That's not me. It's never been me. I am a hands-on kinesthetic learner. I learn by doing, I learn by seeing, I learn by experiencing. And most people that find their way into manufacturing, I will tell you anecdotally, learn the same way. That's why they're in manufacturing, because they love working with their hands, because they love interacting. They love looking over their shoulder at the end of the day and saying, I made that. We need to meet those people where they are, not only with very, very interactive, hands-on type e-learning, but with hands-on skills themselves. And we'll talk about how we take what students and learners learn on an e-learning platform and take it back to a hands-on environment and then back to the manufacturing shop floor and showing them how all those pieces connect. That's really, really important and is the 7th step to a perfect industrial training program. Number 8 of our 10 is the value of certifications. We're going to do an entire webinar on certifications, on third-party certifications, on how we can take the competencies learned by a learner in our training program, tie them to a third-party certification that they can then earn. They can put on the wall in their cubicle. They can put on the wall on the manufacturing floor. They can tag it onto their LinkedIn profile. They can have a digital badge that they carry with them so that they can prove to anybody and everybody else that they have those competencies. And I can tell you, and I've seen it firsthand, that the smile on the faces of the people who earn a third-party certification, in many cases, maybe the 1st or 2nd degree or certification they've earned in their entire life, that smile is priceless. And that sense of accomplishment that they have is priceless. And it's a really, really important element to creating a successful and sustainable training program. Number 9, it's like anything in manufacturing. How do we drive performance in manufacturing? We measure it. We talk about what gets measured gets managed, what gets measured improves. We all know that. Training should be no different. We need to set benchmarks in the same way that we would set a benchmark for how much production we would get done in a day or an hour or a minute. What's our cycle time? What's our takt time? What's our performance to standard? We measure that like crazy in manufacturing. You have to do the same thing with your training program. What are your metrics? How much are your people learning? What are they expected to learn? What courses are they supposed to be in? How long should those courses take? Are they completing them? Are they completing their pathway to a third-party certification? We can measure that, and we must measure that if our training program is to be successful. And the final part, number 10, market your program. This is more important than anything else. I will tell you there are 4 things that we need in order to have a successful e-learning program or training program within a manufacturing environment. The first thing is that we have to have a willing learner. The person on the shop floor, the person who's learning the competencies, the person who is experiencing the learning must be a willing learner. If you have somebody that isn't excited, that doesn't want to be there, that doesn't want to participate, I tell people you're better off leaving them out of the program than forcing them through a program that they don't want to be a part of, because they'll complain about it the whole way through. They'll sour it for everybody else. We need to have a learner that is at least willing to try and at least understands the incredible value of lifelong learning. Number 2, we need to have a willing supervisor. And so whoever is responsible for that person on the shop floor, who's now coming off of the shop floor into the learning environment for an hour or 2 a week, has to be supportive of the program. Why? Because we have crises every day in manufacturing, not the big ones like we talked about already, but little ones. An order is late, a machine went down, we have a quality problem. Those always take precedent over things that are, as Stephen Covey would say, important, not urgent, like our training program. So unless our supervisors recognize that, hey, you've got to be committed to this, you've got to be committed to putting a person in that classroom, in that learning lab every single week, the program won't be successful. Number 3, we need to have a committed C-suite, as I call it, a committed group of executives, people at the top of the org chart, if you will, who are responsible for funding the program. You see, the expensive part of setting up a training program isn't the training program itself. It isn't even building out a learning lab for your people. It's the cost of pulling people off of the floor and paying them to sit in the training program. That can get really, really expensive. Now, we think there's huge paybacks, there's huge ROIs, huge returns on investment for that investment. But the truth is that we need to be able to establish an ROI and market that ROI to somebody in the C-suite so they understand the value of the investment. The 4th thing, by the way, we've already covered, which is that we need to have a way to measure. We need to have a way to measure the competencies and the results and market those results to the rest of the team so they understand that the training program is being effective. So those are the 10 steps to perfect industrial training. Like we said, we are going to cover those in 9 more webinars. We talked about the first one, 9 more webinars now through the fall of 2021. And we invite you to tune back in, and we are going to dive deep on every single one of those topics on every single webinar Wednesday. Remember, the root causes of all the problems in our manufacturing environment typically come back to just a handful of things. Almost every single time, I can tell you from somebody, as someone who worked in manufacturing for 20 plus years, as somebody who has facilitated hundreds of Kaizen events, it's amazing how often the root causes come back to an ineffective training program. And in the next 10 weeks, next 9 weeks, we're going to show you exactly how to implement a world-class one. So Melissa, that's it. We are killing manufacturing. We're killing manufacturing with a lack of talent. We've been in the crisis like this before. It is a crisis. We've been in crises like this before. They are fixable, but it's up to the people on this webinar. It's up to the people on this call to own the problem, recognize that we have a problem, and get on with fixing it. So as we said, we're going to be talking about this for the next several months. And I really appreciate the group that was with us today. And we are going to look forward to seeing you as we roll the rest of this program out. By the end of the program, and even if you miss 1 or 2 sessions, get to as many as you can, you'll have a great idea of how we create a world-class workforce training program. We'll share examples from companies that have already done it, large and small. We'll share examples from industrial employers, from technical colleges, from community colleges, of how we create a world-class training program. So we look forward to having you with us. We're here every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern. Thanks for being with us, and we will see you next week.